We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and this is it. The one day they told us about in high school, where algebra would save our lives. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Mars month, and this week we are talking the 2000 film Red Planet. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by Andrew, my energetic co-host, or Amy C for short. Are you ready for this one, Amy?
Don't do that. Don't do that again.
I'm doing it the whole episode, Andrew.
Oh, no. Oh, dear. Yes. However, I am ready to talk about Red Planet. I am excited to continue down our Mars month with a few movies maybe people aren't as familiar with as what we started it off with. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one that doesn't have the name recognition of some of the other ones, but once you start talking about it, like, oh, it's that movie with Val Kilmer. There's a lot of stories from the behind the scenes. It came out the same year as the other Mars movie. I think people might, snap their fingers like, oh, right. I haven't thought about that movie in years. And that's kind of where I was whenever we put this on our list. I was, up until I watched it this week, I was trying to figure out, like, had I seen this before? I'm familiar with it. I remember all the, the stories and stuff I was just talking about. But Val Kilmer on Mars, like, I can't picture that. And I watched the movie, and I don't think I had ever seen it before. There were certainly a few things that kind of seemed familiar, and I don't know if it was from trailers or maybe I had caught parts of it maybe on cable, especially stuff involving that robot. But I definitely had never watched this beginning to end. Did not know the plot and a lot of the twists and turns. But now I have seen it. And I'm excited to talk about it, Andrew. But what about you? What's your history with this movie? Is this one that you had maybe seen before?
I know I didn't see it in theaters. I don't know if it was rated R. I can't remember. But I think we rented it back in the days of the days of Blockbuster. Because I remember certain scenes from it being in my head, like stuff with the algae and. But I completely kind of forgot a lot of the big swaths of the plot and the details. And I was, so it's always interesting doing that. We've talked about that before, where like you go back to a movie that you remember certain things from vividly, and then the things you don't remember are you just kind of shocking because you feel like you have this picture of the movie in your head, and then you rewatch it and you're like, oh no, I didn't. And I'm not going to make the obvious Kazam Shazam joke here, but just turns out my childhood memory is not as reliable as I thought it was. Oh no. But anyway, so had definitely seen pieces of this before. Like I said, probably watched it, easily 20 years ago, if not longer. This movie came out in 2000. So, probably at least then. So a long time since I'd revisited it. I don't think I've ever revisited it since then. So I was definitely interested in watching our boy Val Kilmer's on Mars.
Our boy Val Kilmer. This is, I think Batman Forever, the only time we've had a chance to properly talk about Val Kilmer on this show.
I think so, which is a shame. Well, not really. It just means he's been in good movies. That's not true. There's definitely other Val Kilmer movies we could talk about on this show.
Island of Dr. Moreau could certainly be an episode. Maybe Ghost in the Darkness. I do remember enjoying that one. But
oh, man. Let me tell you about a movie called The Snowman.
That one is just going to make me sad, Andrew. But it also does feel a little inevitable for the show. Serial Killer Month? Coming soon, perhaps?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But at any rate, today we're talking about Red Planet, the movie that was released November 10th of the year 2000, made on a budget of $80 million at the box office. It only brings in $33.5 million. That is less than half of its production budget, losing a lot of money for the studio. Certified box office bomb, and critically, it is straight up panned by critics. It holds just a 14% critic score on Rotten Tomato, joining that elite class of movies we've talked about that are below 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not an easy thing to do. This one, man, 14. That is low. That feels harsh. Like hashtag PP, I've now seen the movie. That feels a little low.
It does. And that's off like 103 reviews. So like some of these older movies we get, it's like a pool of like 30 or 40 people. This is at least 100 plus reviews, and they're still not kind. And the audience score is better, but not a lot. The audience score is still only a 28%. And that's off a 25,000 rating. So again, a smaller sample size than you used to get on these things. I mean, nowadays, an audience score for a movie is hundreds of thousands, if not millions of reviews, whereas your critics pool can be for big releases upwards of 400 reviews. I mean, we're definitely dealing with smaller sample sizes, but not that small, and people still aren't flocking to it. And the audience score is better, but not by much. And it's always weird to me to watch these movies that have these low scores, and it's kind of wild because you watch it, and like you said, you're just like, this seems a little mean. Like, what are we doing here?
I mean, I'm trying to dissect this 20 years later, but I got to think a lot of the problem is I kind of mentioned already some behind the scenes stories. Val Kilmer and Tom Sizemore basically coming to blows on set, very widely publicized. Val Kilmer kind of had a reputation already going into this of possibly being difficult to work with, and I think this was kind of the peak of the stories. And also, on top of that, I think they didn't know how to market this movie. I mean, I'm looking at the poster, and it's got Val Kilmer jagging Tom Sizemore on Mars. And the tagline is, "Not a sound, not a warning, not a chance, not alone." And looming over their bodies is this strange shadow of a creature with 4 legs. You see the movie, you realize it's a robot, but it's very clearly trying to make this look like an alien movie and like a horror thriller, which it's kind of not. It's a lot slower paced than that. And one more note about this poster: it's got 2 taglines. It's so weird when posters do that, but it has the tagline I just read. It says "Red Planet," and right below "Red Planet" it says "The Color of Fear," as if it's a subtitle of the movie, which it's not. No one's ever called it that. The title credits don't call it that, so I can only consider it to be another tagline. But yeah, anyway, they're really trying to drive home, like I said, that thriller aspect, and strongly hinting at aliens, which I guess technically come into play, but I would not classify this as an alien movie or even really like a thriller.
Yeah, it's a very weird movie because like there are basically like, I mean, we'll talk about it more with scenes, but there's essentially 2 different things kind of running through here. There's this mystery of what happened to all these things that they had sent to Mars ahead of time. There was this mystery of, what happened to all this terraforming stuff. So there's this mystery on the planet itself of what's going on and what's happening. And then there's this other plot of their robot assistant malfunctioning and attacking them. And it kind of stalks them semi on and off throughout the rest of the movie.
Well, I would say there's 3, because there's also Carrie Ann Moss trying to figure out how to get them home.
Get them off of Mars. So a very full movie, when we describe it like that. There's a whole lot going on here. But yeah, I actually saw that, The Red Planet, The Color of Fear, and I was like, is that was that like a subtitle of it? Like, was it actually called that anywhere? It just felt like, thinking about how John Carter of Mars got changed to John Carter. I'd just love to imagine this movie coming out about the same time. So instead of calling it Red Planet, they called it The Color of Fear. Just being like, we're not going to not even tell you that Mars is somehow involved in this movie at all. And then you go watch a movie called The Color of Fear, which sounds like a weird, I don't know. I'm imagining a legal thriller starring Denzel in the late 90s when I hear The
Yeah.
Color of Fear. And just going to watch that movie and suddenly you're like, wait, we're on Mars? What gives?
The movie has two credited writers. We have Chuck Ferrer, who is a former Navy SEAL, writes a lot of nonfiction, but has collaborated on a lot of Hollywood films. Movies like Sudden Impact, Darkman, Hard Target, and The Jackal. So looking up and down his filmography, he's clearly bringing a lot of his real-world expertise and knowledge on military procedure to these movies. And our other credited writer is Jonathan Liemken, who's responsible for such movies like Lethal Weapon 4, Devil's Advocate, and Shooter, which also involves Chuck as a co-writer.
An interesting career, like you said. Chuck Ferrer being a former Navy SEAL, leading ultimately to him writing the movie Navy SEALs. It's I guess there wasn't far from the can't go too far from the well when you do that one. And then, like you said, Jonathan Lemkin, a little bit of a more not many as high profile things, I guess, but was a television writer for 21 Jump Street, Beverly Hills 90210, and Hill Street Blues. Like you said, Lethal Weapon 4, Devil's Advocate, and apparently was one of the many writers who took a pass at Superman Lives during its various attempts at coming to life. So, an interesting group. Like I said, I don't know what the genesis of the script was. Unfortunately, this is a movie that hashtag PP, given that no one really cares about it. There's not a whole lot of production notes out there outside the feud between Val Kilmer and Tom Sizemore. So, unfortunately.
The movie is directed by Anthony Hoffman. Now, Anthony is a South African filmmaker, and this is his only feature-length film. Primarily, they direct a lot of commercials. They're also a photographer. You know those commercials that are like a 5-minute car commercial and it inexplicably has like 3 A-list actors? Those are the kind of commercials that this man directs, both before and after this movie. Now, we can speculate about why he hasn't directed another feature-length film. Part of it has got to be because of the reception and box office numbers for this one. That typically doesn't bode well for the future of your Hollywood career. But I don't really think that is all of it, because it's clear, at least in my opinion, the reasons for this movie's failings. I don't think a lot of them you can point to the director. There's a lot of stuff surrounding this movie that we've already talked about. I also personally kind of get the feeling that maybe he tried Hollywood and decided it simply wasn't for him. Of course, dealing with all the drama of the actors on set. And also, I happen to email this man.
Yes.
Every now and then we have a chance to kind of reach out to filmmakers and people involved in the movies we're talking about, try to get some extra scoops to bring you guys. And I reached out to Anthony and I just said, hey, look, we're covering this movie. Our goal is to talk about positives. We just want to celebrate the greatness in every movie. And I asked for, of course, invited him on the podcast. And I said, is there any stories you can share, some positives, just relay anything. He was very kind to respond, and I'll read you the entire email. He says, "Hi, Chris. Thanks, but no thanks. It was not a positive experience in any manner. Sincerely, Anthony." I thanked him for his reply. I appreciate and respect his decision, but that just doesn't sound like... when you say it's not positive in any manner, I think that's feeding into why we haven't seen another feature-length film from Anthony.
We've talked about it. I've talked about it with other people before, but like there are plenty of directors. Like people were like, "Oh, well, the movie didn't do well," and I was like, "I can name you 100 directors who's almost exclusively make movies that quote unquote don't do well, and they still get projects and they still get stuff because there's other ways they appeal to studios." It's kind of people. I don't know if you're familiar with a comic book artist named Greg Land, Chris.
I know the name. I'm not sure where you're going with this, though.
He's a gentleman that is notorious for what most would call tracing art. A lot of his high-profile stuff is photo reference to the point that people insist it's traced. Widely gets panned for how kind of static his art looks by results because he's using these still images, so there's not a lot of action or momentum to them. And people always ask, well, nobody likes it. No, nobody seems to like his artwork. Why does he keep getting high-profile books? Delivers them on time. On time, no question. And when you're a guy in comic books, especially where we've gotten to that kind of increasing, and no issue with it, where comics, the monthly nature can be a little bit difficult for artists, which is a result of the increase in quality of art and a whole bunch of other things. Like I said, no shade. A guy who can deliver a book on time becomes a standout, becomes somebody that, maybe people don't appreciate it, but we're going to get him out. We're going to do it. And with
that's a good point.
directors,
If every artist was J.H. Williams III, we'd have 7 beautiful books released a year.
Yep, you would. And it happens even with more traditional guys like Olivia Coipel or the Kuberts or Steve McNiven, guys like that. They just, although Brian Hitch has actually like completely turned himself around and now can do monthly books and actually has $2 a month coming out now. It's wild. But a lot of those guys they just don't do monthly books because the artwork is so involved, it's so detailed, it's so precise. And like I said, it looks great. It just means it's not going to be a monthly book, which doesn't bother me as much as it used to. I used to be like, oh, God, why are you going to do this? And then now I'm just kind of like, I'll get it when I get it. There's too many other things going on. But anyway, the point there is that when you're the utilitarian kind of worker, it does stand out. So, if a studio's got a movie that they're trying to deliver on time, under budget, whatever, there's directors who may not have the most critically acclaimed filmography, but they're going to do that for you. They're going to get that movie done. They're going to get it finished. And they're probably going to do it on or under budget. And that becomes a valuable tool to have in your chest. And so those guys continue to work. So it's very odd to me that he would never work again because a studio would be like, oh, Red Planet didn't do well. So I think it definitely is erring more on the personal side of things, which based off of his email, doesn't seem out of the question. You look to somebody like David Fincher after Alien 3. He almost did the same thing where he was kind of like, all right, I don't think Hollywood's for me. And that one was not just script issues, set issues. It was also studio interference. It was a whole lot of other things. And he kind of almost was like, you know what? I'm just going to stick to my commercials and my stuff. And thankfully did come back into the world of film with 7 and continued to deliver. And from all indications, looks to continue delivering great films with the release of his Michael Fassbender assassin movie, The Killer, later this year. But with Anthony, like I said, before this, he was a big commercial guy. He did one of the Clydesdales Budweiser commercials. It was like every high-profile director did one of those. But and then since then, it's kind of just a few short things here and there, but otherwise, mostly just sticking to those, like you said, prestige format car commercials, which, if you're happy, you're happy. Do your thing.
With that, Andrew, I think it's time that we just jump into this movie, talk about the scenes and cast and everything we like about it, everything we think it does well. Red Planet, The Color of Fear. Just kidding. It's not actually called that. You ready?
Yeah.
In the year 2057, Earth is rapidly becoming uninhabitable for humans. In an attempt to secure our future, humans have sent plant life to Mars to create a breathable atmosphere. When the latest readings show a decline in oxygen, a crew of 6 astronauts and scientists are sent to Mars to investigate. When the ship is damaged before landing, only 5 make it to the surface, with 1 staying on board the ship to try and hatch a plan with NASA to return home. On the surface of Mars, the crew finds themselves without supplies and possibly not alone. See, even in my synopsis here, I'm kind of alluding to like there's this dangerous threat on Mars, and there's kind of not, but there kind of is, but it's kind of not the point of the movie. And it's kind of like if you're only thinking about like a killer alien on the planet, you're probably getting disappointed because mostly the movie's about other things than that. And I think there's a lot of interesting ideas in this movie. But again, if you're just waiting for that alien, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we'll talk about it. I mean, I don't know why we're kind of playing coy at this point, but it's like I said, there's this. The movie is kind of built off of this mystery of we've been sending these kind of terraforming missions that are seeding Mars with this atmospheric producing algae. The idea being that the algae is going to produce air levels breathable for humans. And when we get there, we find out that most of this algae is missing. Because they're sent there with this idea that the oxygen level is dropped, but they're also supposed to kind of check on all the progress and see what it's doing and see how it's going. And most of the algae is gone. And so this is like our setup mystery for this movie. It gets sidelined pretty heavily for a good chunk of this movie. Like it's hanging around like in your forefront because they are able to like breathe on Mars and stuff like that, but they don't really investigate and resolve that until way late into the movie. And there's these little hints and teases and stuff that are shown throughout to kind of keep the tension up, but overall that thing is kind of sidelined for a lot of this movie. So it's a very strange movie in that regard. Like we said, there's like 3 plot points here of what's going on, and they don't all get the same amount of attention, I guess is the nice way of putting it.
Well, we're going to break down the plot of this movie and our favorite scenes, of course, but we're going to start with the cast of this movie, starting with the high point, the best casting and best performance of the film, because every episode we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, go ahead and kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Red Planet?
I am going to be going with our lieutenant commander of this whole mission, the main person in charge. I'm going with Carrie-Anne Moss as Kate Bowman. She is given an interesting role throughout this movie. She's with our team at the beginning, but due to a series of events, the rest of the team ejects from the ship and goes down to the planet, and she's kind of left on the ship trying to save it, which she succeeds at. But that means that she spends the latter 2/3 of this movie isolated, basically, by herself. And so she's kind of interacting with the crew, interacting with them from afar, and is given kind of the toughest job because, acting off of nobody is not the easiest thing in the world to do. But she does a great job. She maintains an investment in the rest of the crew that comes through. Also, the empathy and emotion that she shows. And they do have like choice flashbacks throughout the movie, kind of showing kind of some of their life on their mission and their traveling, their original travel to Mars. But I think she does a fantastic job. Sitting in that space of kind of getting the hardest job of being alone, but still, like I said, making it seem like she's invested and has empathy and emotion towards the crew that still comes through. So, Carrie-Anne Moss, how can you go wrong?
I agree. How can you go wrong? Because my Mark Strong Award is also going to Carrie-Anne Moss. She's wonderful. Love her in everything that she's in. We've had a chance to talk about her quite a bit. Alum of the show, because we covered all the Matrix sequels. I got to talk to her about her a lot back then. Maybe even picked up another Mark Strong Award on Resurrections. I'm trying to remember, but certainly worthy of many Mark Strong Awards throughout her career. In one of my favorite movies of all time, Memento. Talked about that plenty of times. Love her there. Literally everything I've ever seen her show up in, she is always just so captivating. And great here. And great point about her essentially on screen by herself through most of the time. I mean, we have a very narrow scope on this cast, but even the crew that makes it to Mars are constantly interacting with each other and playing off of each other. But Carrie-Anne Moss on that ship trying to get it working, it's just her and mumbling to herself and getting frustrated and occasionally talking like with NASA back on Earth. But just really, doing a lot of heavy lifting there. It's that classic plot device where it's like, oh, the thing has been damaged. The automatic thing doesn't work. We have to use the manual, which means one person has to stay behind to manually do the thing. Like I've seen that in so many like sci-fi movies and otherwise, but it's effective. You know, there's a reason they go back to it. I have no idea if like ships actually work that way. Like if there's like a worst case scenario, someone sacrifices themselves to manually pull this lever because the computer broke. I don't know, but it makes for high tension in movies. But yeah, Carrie-Anne Moss, she's wonderful. Happy to give her the Mark Strong Award.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, she's Moss. She's Moss. What can you say?
It's Moss.
It's Moss. But yeah, she does a great job here. Like I said, she's just a very, like I said, captivating. I guess is the right word. And man, this is like pre-Memento. This is just right
Same
after
year
Matrix,
as
too.
Memento, right? Or is Memento?
Memento. Oh no, Memento is 2000, so it might actually be before this. Oh no, because Memento doesn't come out in the United States until 01. It debuts at Venice in 2000. But anyway, this is all coming out at the same time. You know, Matrix the year before, Chocolat the next year, Red Planet, Memento. What a run! Can't be shocked about that. But like I said, still out there doing her thing, still fantastic, and no exception here.
And as we said, Val Kilmer is in this movie. You could argue he's the lead. It's definitely an ensemble film, but, you know, it's a Val Kilmer movie. He's playing a Robbie Gallagher, who is an engineer on board here. They keep kind of jokingly referring to him as the janitor. His job is just to fix stuff, including Amy, the robot that is supposed to help them navigate. But Andrew, we learn early in the movie, there's also a military mode for this robot. That doesn't.
You gotta
seem
wonder.
safe.
You gotta wonder if that's going to come back to be a problem.
Red and it attacks things. Weird. Yeah, that definitely comes back. But look, it's Val Kilmer. He is just one of our all-time greats. I kind of think of this as like late stage Val Kilmer. It's really not. I mean, his career goes on for quite a while after this, but he's got his heyday in the 90s, you know, kind of hits big in the 80s. 90s is his decade, really. And then by the year 2000, he's got this reputation. He's had a few bombs. This one's a bomb, and he kind of just goes much more low profile after this. And then he has his troubles with his health, and just, you know, we know the story from there. But yeah, this is definitely past like all of his hits, and he's starting to look a little bit older. He's kind of, his face has taken on a new shape, and it's like I said, what I consider late stage Val Kilmer, but the man still has it. Like I'll say this about his character, like I don't like him in the first third of the movie, maybe, but I definitely come around by the end, and part of that I think is the writing and the acting, and part of it is hashtag PP. I'm not sure how much of that was intended for me to not like him so much in the beginning, but the more time we spend with the character, definitely the more I like him. And he's ends up being our last survivor. Spoilers, on Mars, and I mean it's Val Kilmer. I'm just happy to see Val Kilmer. It's hard to separate. You know, I watched that. We've talked about it previously. That documentary Val, and he does dive into his reputation of being difficult to work with, probably starting way back on like Batman. Island of Dr. Moreau didn't help, and this one's kind of like the final nail in the coffin. And he doesn't say too much specifically about Red Planet. He talks more about the other two, but he doesn't really deny being a diva. It kind of gives like his reasoning for his frustrations. I kind of get the feeling that he doesn't resent his Hollywood career, but he makes it clear that he didn't get to play the types of roles that he truly liked as much as he wanted to, and kind of got forced into kind of some more traditional leading man roles that weren't as exciting to him. I don't think this role in particular was very exciting to him, but Val Kilmer just can't help but be a good actor, it turns out.
Yeah, it turns out. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan, obviously, just back from, you know, his first two feature-length movies. I mean, his first 4 movies are Top Secret, Real Genius, Top Gun, and Willow. Like, as far as I'm concerned, you can't come out the gate with a much more collection of iconic performances than those, at least as far as I'm concerned. And then,
I never put together that 2 of them are Top Secret and Top Gun. That's kind of funny.
Yeah. And then I mean, The Doors is his 6th movie. Like, I didn't realize how few movies he'd done before he really does like explode. Because then you get to the mid 90s and he's doing like 3 movies a year for 93, 95, and 96. Like, that's when Tombstone, and I mean, he's even in True Romance briefly, and Batman and Heat, and like we mentioned, Ghost in the Darkness, Island of Dr. Moreau, those all come out. And like, Island of Dr. Moreau is probably where, I don't know, that's probably where the reputation crystallizes, because he was supposed to be like a major part of that movie. And then like weeks/days before filming basically said, no, I don't want to. And kind of was asking to be cut back to like a supporting player. And that required a massive rewrite of the script. And it's one of those things where I was like, I didn't realize you could do that. Like, you know, you could just like walk up to like a film production like days before it starts and be like, you know how I'm basically the star of this movie? I'd like to not be.
I mean, I don't think anybody can do that, but you gotta get a certain cachet before you get there. But yeah, I think
especially in a movie, especially with a movie with Marlon Brando. Like, you can't have Marlon Brando and another diva on set.
I think he takes the role because he gets to work with Marlon Brando, who he loves, and then he meets modern Brando, and he's like, "Oh, I don't. This isn't what I thought it was gonna be." And
that's very possible. Very possible. And it's funny. There's actually an interview with Christopher Reeve in the aftermath of the first Superman where somebody kind of asks him about Marlon Brando, and he's very particular with his words about him. Like he's like, he does the whole kind of, yeah, he's Marlon Brando, yeah, but he kind of has to like dance around the fact that like Brando was super difficult to work on set with, and like kind of was reading out, like he dances around, but like you can read between the lines and Reeve kind of says something similar where he's kind of like, yeah, he's not what you think he is at this point. Like, you see him as like Streetcar Named Desire and things like that, or even The Godfather, which wasn't that long before, but he's like, but then now it's kind of like, eh. And but I mean, like, it's when Val Kilmer shows up, you know, there's some of my favorite movies ever. Like, I love Top Secret and Real Genius. I love a movie he did called Thunderheart, which is kind of a kind of neo-Western mystery film that is like a murder on an Indian reservation, and Val Kilmer kind of plays this FBI agent that gets sent in to investigate. Very similar vibe at times to Wind River, which was a movie that came out just a few years ago with Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen about a murder related to an Indian reservation. But it's really, really good. And then, like you said, 93, 94, 95, that's where you get Tombstone, Batman Forever, Heat. Heat is, man, he's not the star of Heat, but he's so good in it. And Heat is just so good a movie, people. If you haven't seen Heat, you really need to go watch Heat, and then you'll see where Dark Knight was ripped off from. I'm kidding, folks. Don't punch me. But seriously, watch Heat, and you're going to be shocked.
I'm joking, but...
Also, seriously. But also...
We'll call it homage.
Yeah, Michael Mann might deserve a co-writing credit on Dark Knight, is all I'm saying. And then even like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I don't know if... I feel like we've had to have talked about that, but I love him in that movie.
Oh, yeah. So good.
He's fantastic. Obviously, that was also Robert Downey Jr.'s kind of return to leading man status, and
it's we always say that, but like, it's Val Kilmer too, at least for me. I was like, man, I haven't seen Val Kilmer in something in a while, even though it's like a few years after this, I guess, but I had never seen this. But yeah, both of them, I was like, yeah, where have you guys been? You both still got it. You're great. And God, I wish they would have made 5 more of those movies. It's so good.
Shane Black has 2 different movies where I was like, I wish there was 8 more of these.
Yes, 100%.
But yeah, and then it's after Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, you kind of are like, oh, maybe we're in it's not just the Downey Renaissance, it's the Kilmer Renaissance too. Doesn't really happen. It's interesting.
You're overlooking one of his greatest villain roles.
I understand you're about to mention MacGruber. MacGruber's 5 years later, and but what's interesting is looking at his filmography. Like, he's got like 2006, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He's in like 4 or 5 movies a year, but a lot of them are increasingly more direct to video. And I was just kind of like, that seems so strange that Val Kilmer in like the mid 2000s was direct to video status. Like, that seems so strange to me. And then has a few attempts at returns throughout the years since then, but then obviously he starts running into his health problems. The Snowman, I remember watching and being kind of stoked about, to be like, oh snap, Val Kilmer in this weird Nordic murder mystery. It's disappointing, folks. And then lately, it's all basically cameos. That's really all it is, including very recently in Top Gun Maverick, which was the best scene in the whole movie, as far as I'm concerned.
So good.
And so good. They used his real voice for that and then just digitally altered it so that it could be clearly understood. It was not like an AI. People thought it was like an AI of his voice or something. And I'm like, what was always strange to me about people saying that is, I'm like, if you listen to Val Kilmer in that scene, he doesn't sound like Val Kilmer. He sounds like a guy with throat problems talking, which is turns out what it was. But people are like, oh, they used AI. And I was like, well, if it was AI, wouldn't he sound like he normally did? Like you would think. But anyway, Joseph Kosinski did confirm that it's his real voice, which I also thought was cool. And I also just saw that he voiced Kit on the reboot of Knight Rider in 2008. Didn't realize that. And then even has an episode of Psych that he shows up in. He's just so good, folks. Like, I just can't tell you enough about how great he is. And I like Val Kilmer. He's pretty great. And in here, he's also given a very odd space to be in, because he's kind of meant to be, I guess, our audience surrogate in a lot of ways, because he's the character we're focusing on, and he's the one that's kind of the least science-y of all these people on this Mars mission. But yeah. And I do need to watch Val. I just think it's going to make me sad, which is why I haven't. I just am like,
it's definitely. I'm like, you watch him talk, how he talks now, and I'm like, God, this is so sad. But he's listen to what he's saying, and he's seems totally like. There's times when he kind of dwells on it until it makes him down, but he seems to be in a good place and happy with it and doing just fine. So in that regard, like, it kind of makes me feel better thinking about what he went through, seeing that he is himself doing good and loves his family and just totally enjoying his life. So I think in that regard, it's definitely worth watching. But it's like shocking, like the first time you hear him talk and what he sounds like now, and it's rough. But the coolest, the hook for that documentary is that he's been filming his entire life since childhood. He has a warehouse full of 8mm in different formats that he's used over the years of home videos. So every single movie set he's ever been on, him making movies with his brothers, as he goes through his life, there's footage for all of it. It's insane. He's kind of documented his entire life. I don't think that was necessarily his intention. He just loved filming stuff, but it turns into this very compelling documentary. So
it's always interesting because you hear people kind of lament that. You hear people kind of lament that now that everybody's life is documented so heavily. And here's a guy that did that going back to the 70s, 60s, 70s. And it's kind of wild to think about. But yeah, I'll have to watch it when I'm in the right headspace, which I don't know, these days probably means never. But we'll see. But I do love me some Val Kilmers. And yeah. I'm glad we got to talk about him because he's one of, like, Top Secret and Real Genius are, for some reason, some of my earliest movie memories. Like, I remember my parents had Top Secret, like, taped off of television. And I remember
the Williams
watching
Vault,
that.
of course.
There genuinely was very close to like a Williams Vault at one point. And I'm actually kind of sad that it really doesn't exist anymore. They kept some stuff, but, you know, in the advent of DVD and streaming and everything, my parents were like, I guess we don't need a veritable massive array of VHS, but there was well over 100 tapes. And it was just, it's one of those things that you wish you could go back and get, just because there's literally days where I will go onto YouTube and purposely look for things taped off TV with the commercials intact. Because I don't just want the experience of watching the thing. I want the experience of watching the thing when I watched it as a kid. I don't know if that makes any sense.
You watched The Thing as a kid? It's pretty scary.
Yeah, exactly.
Movie.
That's 100% what I'm talking about, you prick. Like, a big one that comes into my head is the old Rankin Bass Rudolph stop motion special where Burl Ives plays the snowman who narrates it. And I remember watching that off my parents' taped copy, and it was off television. It had commercials and everything. And I remember there was like very specific commercials for things like 7 Up, like back when the red dots were all the rage for the 7 Up commercials. I don't even know if there are 7 Up commercials now. I don't think there are. I know 7 Up still exists, but like there was a point where 7 Up was like this weird brand where like they had mascots and everything. It was very the 90s were a wild time, folks. 7 Up was its own brand. But like other like Sears commercials and stuff like that. So sometimes I really want to put myself in the headspace of watching it like I was then. So I'll do that. And so I do miss the Williams Vault at times just for it's like you said, it's that weird thing where it's like everything is available to me at the tip of my fingers now, and what I want is the experience of having to watch something with commercials taped off
100%.
television. And it's just further kind of reinforcement to me, at least, that while the efficiency and ease of access now is better than ever, something did get lost in the process. Anyway.
We've mentioned Tom Sizemore is in the movie. Obviously, there was a high-profile feud going on with Val Kilmer to the point where they were refusing to be on set together. Again, you kind of realize why Anthony did not want to make another movie after dealing with all this. Tom Sizemore plays Dr. Quinn, Medicine Man. Just kidding. And sort of the second lead on, at least for the Mars crew, because he survives the longest. And we could talk about his character and his role here. Tom Sizemore actually passed away at the beginning of this year due to a brain aneurysm. And before that, lots of troubling accusations and beyond actual... what's beyond accusation, Andrew? What? And
committed acts. Like he wasn't accused. He did the things he was accused of.
There you go. Yeah. So don't have much to say about the person. And as far as his other roles, I mean, he's a character actor through a number of decades, popped up here and there. But just talking about his role here, he's another character that I don't care too much about in the beginning, but kind of come around by the end. It gets to make a big sacrifice in his final act so that Val Kilmer can be the one to make it back to the ship.
Yeah. Like you said, I don't have a whole lot to say about him. I will, I guess, say that I realize drug addiction is a very, very bad thing. That obviously can lead people down very dark paths, and it appears to have led him down a tremendously dark path. And that's all we really need to say about that. The implication is that he was able to overcome those at some point, which is great, but that doesn't undo the damage. So yeah, his character here is, like I said, him and Kilmer kind of have this rapport throughout the film that I didn't realize how deep the feud went, to the point that like they apparently like were using body doubles to shoot scenes with both actors, and they would, like, you know, if it was just going to be the two of them in a scene, they would use a body double and like do the coverage at different times just so that they didn't need to be on set together. And to the point that apparently Sizemore was asked to not actually hit Kilmer in the face when they have a fight in the movie. And instead, apparently, he actually just hit him in the chest because, you know, it's much better. At least it wasn't the stomach. That's how Houdini died. Yeah, it
Tom
definitely shows.
Sizemore hit Harry Houdini in the stomach.
Houdini got punched in the stomach, and that's how he died. Well, you know, the punch to the stomach caused damage he failed to have appropriately addressed, and that killed him. So go to the doctor if you don't feel right, folks. Don't be Houdini. It's
the real moral here.
the real moral of this story. But overall, like I said, he's fine. But like I said, he's playing off of Kilmer. They've got their tensions throughout the film just because they think they're kind of stranded and stuck here. Yeah,
I think the rapport is actually really good. Like watching the movie, like I buy their friendship and growing closer, and they seem to like be really genuine with each other. So it's crazy that it's the complete 180 of what it was in real life. But I say kudos to our director for being able to still capture it and make it work.
I agree. Good job, Anthony. Or Mr. Hoffman, I'm sorry.
Benjamin Bratt plays Lieutenant Ted Santon. And, it's early 2000s. This is a lot of Benjamin Bratt back then. Alum of the show. We got to talk about him back on Catwoman. I'm a big fan of this guy. I love anytime he shows up. One of those classic, like the movie he's in may not always be great, but I think he's always crushing it. Very handsome gentleman. A bit of a hard ass in this movie, kind of causes some tensions and leads to his demise whenever he insults another crew member and gets pushed off of a cliff. Andrew, let me ask you a question. He gets pushed off a cliff, and you see his body falling down this giant cavern, but you don't see him hit the ground. Were you expecting him to come back throughout the rest of this movie?
It definitely occurred to me more than once that he could potentially come back. Obviously, he
either
does.
Like the gravity wasn't strong enough for it to be fatal, or like
he was able to like grab onto something, or whatever.
Yeah, or an alien takes over his body. You see his suit walk up. It's something like that, but it never happens. He just died.
It does not. He just dies, and it's unfortunate. So he's only in like the first third of the movie. He kind of exits, and the tension of the nature of his death kind of weighs over the rest of the guys on Mars for a while, where they don't necessarily trust the remaining crew member we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, he's Benjamin Bratt. I mean, in the year 2000, he was in 5 movies. He was in The Next Best Thing, The Last Producer, Red Planet, Miss Congeniality, and Traffic. So he was, in the year 2000, if you went to the movies, there was a really good chance you were going to see Benjamin Bratt at some point. And he was even recently in a show that I liked quite a bit called Poker Face, the Ryan Johnson kind of comedy murder mystery starring Natasha Lyonne. And he was great in that, as always, which is Poker Face is just a fantastic show, folks. Follows the kind of Columbo, follows the kind of Columbo method, which is called it's an inverted story that they kind of call the How Catch 'em, which is more where you see the murder happen, and then the tension is, will the person figure out how it happened, or will they get away with it? So that's kind of how Columbo episodes are for the most part. You see the first, fourth of a Columbo episode is the crime being committed by whoever's committing the crime and whoever these people are, and the rest of it is Columbo trying to figure it out. Don't use that one as much, but I think it's really, really good. And this show was no exception. It was fantastic. Benjamin Bratt's great. Like, he's not in the movie very much. It's kind of unfortunate, but when he is here, it's great.
Simon Baker plays Dr. Chip Pettengill. Now, he is one of the scientists that is there. He's in charge of the terraforming, which is why there's a lot of tension between him and Benjamin Bratt, who's more military and thinks these scientist guys are just weaklings that can't handle it. Once the ship goes wrong and they're in survival mode, he doesn't think they're going to be able to keep up, and he insults him, and I guess that's when he gets killed. There's that moment when Simon Baker's character comes back to camp and meets up with Val Kilmer and Tom Sizemore, and he tells them the lie that he fell off the cliff. A little bit of dramatic irony here, because we, the audience, knows what really happened. And you can see on their faces when they hear the story that they don't know if they quite believe him. And that is a thread throughout probably the middle third of this movie, kind of the uneasiness between these 3 remaining survivors. I think there's a lot of cool ideas in this movie. Hashtag positivity podcast. Some of them are maybe a little bit undercooked, and I wish they got explored a little bit more. But that one, I think, is a really smart way to kind of seed the tension between the group.
I think so too. Simon Baker, probably most notably known for The Mentalist. He was the lead guy on that show.
Yeah.
Kind of that's the thing that I, at least I'd never really seen The Mentalist, but I knew he was in it. Looked through his filmography, not a whole lot of other stuff I've seen. Land of the Dead. I saw Once Upon a Time. Some other stuff I didn't even realize about. He's also in The Devil Wears Prada, which, everybody was in The Devil Wears Prada. But yeah, I think his character is given an interesting kind of ripple here, where there's that tension that kind of boils over, and it boils over in a lethal way. And he's got to kind of sit with that. You can kind of see that it sticks with him. He kind of, it's a moment of weakness where he shoves him. And I don't, did he mean to push him off the ledge? Does it change the fact he pushed him off the ledge? That's kind of the whole question that you, the audience, already have. And then obviously he lies to the group because, he doesn't want to just be like, yeah, I shoved him off a cliff, or, I didn't mean to shove. There's no good way to say you accidentally pushed someone off a cliff. So,
Right.
So he kind of has to sit with that. And obviously the tension between him and Kilmer and Sizemore comes through, where they don't really know they can trust this guy. And then ultimately it turns out they are correct. Yeah, good performance by Simon Baker, though.
And lastly, we have Terrence Stamp. Not Malcolm McDowell, but Terrence Stamp as Dr. Bud Chantelis, who's the chief science officer. I love the characterization of this character because he's the chief science officer, but is always talking about faith and God and the possibility of a higher power. And most people think those things are at odds with each other. And he has this great line, like he said, when he found that science couldn't answer the most interesting questions, and that's when he turned to faith. And you get the feeling that even if he doesn't necessarily at this time believe definitively in a higher power, he is open to the idea, and it seems to be that's what he's hoping to find as we go explore this new planet. And it's just, he's got some interesting conversations with Val Kilmer, and this character is all about just presenting these interesting ideas. Because he's essentially the first one to die. Once they're on this planet, they see that they're running out of oxygen. He doesn't want to slow them down, so he just stays there to die, and they leave him. And that's it. We never see him again. And he doesn't have really many, conflicts or stories that follow through. He was just this interesting character we got to spend some time with, played wonderfully by Terrence Stamp. Just an interesting looking and sounding dude. I love anytime he shows up.
Yeah, alum of the show, obviously was in our Elektra episode where he played Stick. Definitely been in a few other things. We'll see if he makes his way back around to the show again. But like you said, just a fantastic performance. Just one of those little slivers of characters who he's there and then he's gone. And it's good stuff. Like you said, Terrence Stamp obviously being a great actor. Stuff like Clockwork Orange is just fantastic. I'm joking, folks. That's Malcolm McDowell. They don't look alike.
They look exactly, but only in their old age. Young men, they look totally different.
Now,
but they grew into the same person.
I don't see it. I really, really don't. But anyway, even more recently with stuff like Last Night in Soho. So he's still out there, still doing his thing. And I think it is fantastic to just see him in this kind of small role that he brings a little bit of that. What's the term I'm looking for, Chris?
Gravitas.
That's it. That's the stuff. Yeah. Always great.
Well, Andrew, like I said, it's a narrow scope on this cast. It's just these crew members. It's actually the only people we ever see on screen, I believe. I think we just hear Carrie-Anne Moss talking to people back on in NASA, but very narrow scope. And with that, it's time to move into the scenes of this movie. And we're going to start by talking about our personal favorite scene of the film. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders, and what is the best scene of Red Planet?
So I'm actually going to go with, we'll call it a standard answer, but I'm going to be going with the climax of the film here, which throughout the course of this film, all of our plots do finally converge. We have found a way to get our guys off of the planet back onto the ship in orbit. We have also solved the mystery of what happened to the algae. And I guess I'll go ahead and say it here. They find out that they are indeed not alone on Mars. There is a species of nematodes, which I remember from the Doug cartoon.
Exactly what I was thinking. Yes. I
Um,
I kind of thought Nematode was a fictional character, not character, but creature. But I guess this is a real thing. And these nematodes we see on Mars look nothing like what Doug led me to believe they would look
right.
like.
Doug made you think they look like frogs or something. But yes, anyway, nematodes. And nematodes don't even look like these things that they are here. They're more worm type things. But anyway, we discover that this species of nematodes has. It's not made clear where they came from necessarily. Like, were they
I say
native
there's
to
still
Mars?
a mystery beyond that. We just kind of
Right.
solved one part of the problem.
We just kind of figured out that they're here. They ate the algae, but it turns out they actually release oxygen when they digest the algae, which is what makes Mars atmospheres now breathable to a degree. So it has apparently it the way Wikipedia describes it, the biochemistry of the nematodes is capable of producing oxygen far more efficiently than human science can. So basically, the science of these creatures may be the key to terraforming Mars, so that we can then in turn ruin Mars now too. But so they take a couple of them to get them back, but now again, this all rests on Kilmer getting off the planet. So they find that there is this old Russian probe, but they discover that it has enough fuel, but not enough electrical power to charge or to power it while it's in launch. Gallagher, Val Kilmer's character, is kind of the only one left alive at this point. We'll talk about some more scenes about how everybody else perishes kind of later, but he realizes that our rogue robot's power core, which is the only kind of dangling plot at this point, is the only thing that could potentially replace it. So he sets a trap and is able to disable the robot finally. We get this kind of tense kind of standoff with them that ultimately results in him kind of using does he use the rocket fuel? I forget exactly what he uses. He does. He ditches some of the fuel and he's able to use that to lure her into a trap. It blows her up and he's then able to steal the battery, which just conveniently is completely compatible with this old Russian probe.
Oh yeah,
I realize, of course it is. That might actually be something that's required, that all the things be compatible. I don't know, because I've never gone into space. And so not just on the side of this, you've got a lack of communication now between Carrie Ann Moss's Bowman and Gallagher at this point. So she's kind of expecting that he's not getting off the planet and is almost getting ready to leave and return because she is on a decaying ship as well at this point. So there's this time crunch that kind of boils down to eventually Gallagher, right as she's about to, or Bowman, right as she's about to kind of leave, sees Gallagher's probe enter orbit and is able to bring him onto the ship and kind of revive him and make sure that he's okay. And we get our nematodes back to Earth and we'll maybe save the planet. Just maybe.
Just maybe, Andrew. It's a good pick. I do like the finale of this movie. For a movie that is not action heavy, and again, probably not a lot of what the marketing is making you think it's going to be, I still think the finale delivers on giving us a good action scene. It's very, reminds me of Predator. The end of Predator, like setting a trap, luring it in, and taking out the threat. Because up until then, Amy, this robot that got stuck in military mode, is clearly outpowering all of them. Like, it's not, they don't have a chance. Like, it breaks Tom Sizemore's rib as a guerrilla warfare tactic, so it slows down the whole group. Like, this thing is, like, pretty brutal. So luring it into this trap, I think, is pretty exciting. I do love, like, what leads to this, because a lot of this movie, just like a lot of, desperation in space movies, is like, our ship's been damaged. How do we repair it? What do we have around here? That's like the Apollo 13 model, and we've seen it a million times since then. And this movie's been doing that throughout, whether it's Carrie Ann Moss up on her ship or the guys on the ground trying to scrounge together whatever they can get. And I love that, Carrie Ann Moss relays this solution to him with a Russian probe, and he's getting everything going, and then realizes that he doesn't have enough power. And Carrie Ann Moss is like, well, is there anything else that you can use? And he goes, let me look around, see if I can find any alternative high voltage sources. No, just rocks. It's best line of the movie, at least the funniest line of the movie. I love that.
Absolutely.
But then he sees the drone that Amy shoots off fly by, and he goes, an alternate high voltage source, and he realizes that he'll be able to use Amy. So I like that. I like the final showdown. I like the action. I think it's a fitting end to this movie. And the movie it's pretty bleak at times, and I wouldn't have been surprised if he doesn't make it off the planet. If the movie ends in tragedy, if it ends and he gets so close and he doesn't make it, like I would have. There's enough of a tone going throughout the movie that I feel like that might be ultimately our ending, but we get the happy ending, which I'm also fine with, of course. But Andrew, it's a good pick. It's a good pick. I like it. I was thinking about this one. I think I'm gonna highlight a different scene from my personal favorite. The best thing I can say about this movie, because again, I think the critics are a little harsh on it, but also I get why it's not the best reception, but I think there's just a lot of interesting ideas here, and I think it plays out like a pretty good episode of Twilight Zone. It's not, they make it to, if in a Twilight Zone episode they make it to Mars, even if they are going to run into an alien, before we get there, it's going to go through every possible interesting conflict we can between the groups, like the dramatic irony of knowing that one of them killed another one, and are they going to find out, and the tensions within the crew. That's going to be explored, and I think this movie does a great job doing that, and it comes to a head and what I'm going to call my favorite scene, which is whenever this ice storm is coming, and our three survivors, which I realize we keep calling them by the actors' names, but come on. Val Kilmer, Tom Sizemore, and Simon Baker all huddle into a cave to shelter themselves from the ice.
Yeah.
Which, if the plan is to live on Mars, what are we going to do about these ice storms? That seems like a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? Earth is screwed. We gotta figure something out. But I like this because they all huddle in there, and again, we still have this tension. We're like, actually, there's a lot of tension here because at this point, I think Val Kilmer knows that only two of them are going to make it out, even though there's three members of the crew left, but he hasn't told the other crew. And then, of course, we know that Simon Baker killed Benjamin Bratt. And you're wondering, like, if it's going to come up, and there's like this moment of levity where they all laugh, and then Simon Baker's character just breaks. And he's like, y'all are going to kill me and leave me behind. Because he knows, or he doesn't believe me. He thinks that I killed Lieutenant Sanson. And, like, no one was calling him out. But you could tell it was like a telltale heart situation where, like, the guilt was eating him up inside so much that he finally had to just address it himself and just blurt it out. And Tom Sizemore is like, yeah, I don't trust you. And Val Kilmer's trying to keep the peace. And we kind of just sit in this tension until they fall asleep and Simon Baker makes a run for it to try to make it off the planet all by himself. Of course, when he does, Amy shows up again and kills him in a pretty brutal scene. But I like that. I like it's the, your favorite scene is the climax of the film itself and our action climax. But I feel like this scene in the cave is sort of our emotional climax, or at least certain threads coming to a head that have been carried out throughout the movie. So I like that. I think there's a lot of, again, I keep saying it, a lot of cool ideas here, and these are some of the smartest ideas of the movie really coming to a head. Because the last thing I want to say about this dramatic irony with knowing that he killed him is, at the time that he kills Benjamin Bratt, everyone thinks they're gonna die. All their supplies have been destroyed. They're running out of oxygen. They have nothing left to do but slowly die on this planet. And that's why Simon Baker's kind of losing it. And Benjamin Bratt's trying to keep us cool and die with some dignity. So whenever he pushes him off the cliff, he's like, wow, I can't believe I did that. But we're all going to die anyway. But then he walks back over to the other two guys. And Val Kilmer is the first one to run out of oxygen. Takes off his helmet and realizes he can breathe. So now Simon Baker realizes, like, Benjamin Bratt was moments away from realizing they're all going to live whenever he killed him, and that's what's really eating him up inside. And like I said, comes to a head in the cave. Favorite scene in the movie.
It's a great one. I think it's like you said, the emotional climax. They wake up to find out that, like you said, he has fled. Simon Baker, Pettingill, as it were, and he gets killed by Amy, but not just does he then get killed by Amy, his body gets infested with these nematodes, and so when they are trying to, so it's again, if that's more hints to us, the audience, that there are these creatures here. We're given a few hints. Like I think early on, we get like a glimpse of one of them running by.
You keep seeing the ground move, and it's such a cool. Like it's not on screen long enough for you to register what's happening. You just see movement. It's pretty cool.
And so there's thousands of these things, millions even. And like I said, they're the ones that are essentially making Mars breathable. We still don't know where they came from. We don't know if they were dormant creatures here that saw the algae and were able to start eating it. We don't know. I mean, what more is there to Mars? We didn't get, Red Planet 2, The Smell of Fear. And we didn't get the answer to these questions.
I mean, that's a great point, Andrew. These nematodes, these little creatures burrowing through this man's body. I mean, whenever they light him on fire and they explode out of him, just imagine the smell, Andrew.
Imagine the smell.
Imagine the smell of fear.
The smell of fear. Hey, you heard it here, folks. So if Warner Brothers Roadshow, you guys are listening. I'm sending in ideas, but yeah. So this kind of does lead directly into our next sequence, which is where they actually find one of these algae fields, which to this point they had kind of believed were all gone. And this is actually what leads to the end of Tom Sizemore's Birkenau character. This is where we discover the nematodes. Kind of at this point, the crew, not we, but the crew kind of discovers that these things exist, what they are. And he ends up snagging 2 of them because he's like, you need to study these. These are potentially the key to saving Earth and the key to terraforming Mars. And so they imply that the Martian insects are kind of laying dormant here, but basically, that still doesn't really answer all the questions. But they find the bugs eating this algae. And once we sent the algae, it gave them this new food source. They were, they exploded in population, and Sizemore ends up sacrificing himself so that Val Kilmer can get to the Russian probe safe and sound. Basically, he also basically explodes, basically blows himself up to basically die with, he didn't want the bugs to be the thing that killed him, and creates this massive explosion that gives Kilmer the distraction he needs to get away and not be kind of consumed by these nematodes, which takes it down to just Kilmer. It's just him at that point. Him, Carrie Ann Moss in the orbit, and a killer robot, and an army of nematodes, which those odds still aren't very good. So he's still not working with a lot in his favor there. I also didn't mention this during my scene. I love that when he brings up like the Russian computer screen, there's the weird little bear. Is it a bear like in the corner? That, like,
yes. Is that a 90s thing? I know this is 2000, but like I feel like a lot of times you'll see a computer screen and a little avatar. I guess because like we the audience can't read all the text, especially when it's another language. So we need like a little character to convey what's being said, because like Jurassic Park does it, Face Off does it, and here in Red Planet we have this little character. It's like sad face when it's not working, or clapping when you get it right.
I personally blame Clippy from Microsoft Word.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Hey, do you need some help? No, Clippy. When I need your help, I'll ask for it, which will be never. But yeah, I always love when that happened. You're right. It was this trend in the late 90s that we would just have these kind of, it's in a different language. Oh, here you go. You can figure this out now. But yeah, so this scene too with Sizemore sacrificing himself is pretty gnarly. And it's where the kind of what happened to the algae subplot. So we get these kind of several concurrent scenes, because it basically goes from the ice storm to Pettingill's body to the algae field to our finale. And so they definitely all of our stuff gets resolved. Pretty straight order there. And like I said, it does result in Kilmer getting off the planet with the nematodes, giving just a little bit of hope for the future of the human race. But do we deserve it? And will we make the most of it? Find out next week on The Outer Limits.
Well, I realized like we, in neither of our favorite scenes, we talked about Carrie Ann Moss, who's both of our Mark Strong Award winner. And like I'm going through the scenes, like my notes here, and like I don't have a lot, but it's because it's her by herself, and she's doing a good job. But how do you like really dive into? Like I really like the scene where she contemplated for a while and pushed a few buttons. Like it's hard to really dive into, but she's doing a great job throughout. Like I said, the reason she's getting my Mark Strong Award is she's like the one character I liked from beginning to end versus a lot of them had to grow on me. But I think from the first scene, she's fully formed, and I really like her dynamic. I like that she's the one in charge and can be a bit of a hard ass. Like she catches them making like moonshine in space, and they all think they're busted, and she's clearly disappointed, but also takes a shot with them. Like she kind of rides that correct's not the right way, but rides the fine line of like, clearly I'm the boss, but like it's also important that we bond and get along and become an actual team here. And you see why they all kind of fall in line. Tom Sizemore's character crosses a line at one point. It's kind of gross, and you can she makes it clear that was too far. So she's a good boss, a good leader, and works tirelessly throughout the entire movie. But yeah, even those early scenes, I'm not liking most of the crew. #PP, but I'm liking her from the first scene.
I agree. I think she's great. The authority she kind of sets on the ship, letting you know that she's not going to take crap from really anyone. It all works out really well. I like it a lot. She's just fantastic. Because yeah, it's tough because once the ship kind of splinters, there's no real scenes. She's just kind of interacting with the crew, or it's her briefly talking to Houston, who is voiced by Bob Neal. Just wanted to throw out to him. No idea who he is. Just know that anytime she talks to Houston, he's the voice that answers. And yeah, she's kind of the thread that holds the whole thing together in a lot of ways. She kind of keeps the movie moving along at all costs and acts as kind of this conduit through which the characters get to their final destination. And she does a great job. It's fantastic.
I really like the design of Amy. I mean, we kind of, why is there a robot that has military mode on this mission? I don't really know. It makes sense as a navigational robot, but it's such a cool design, and it is there might be some practical there, but it's a CG a lot of the time. And just the way it moves, though, the way like it'll flip over, turn its head, then it's right side up again. The way it even converts to military mode and has like this karate stance is kind of silly looking, but still pretty cool. I just think it's a great design. It's got the drone that shoots out of it. I really thought it was pretty creative little character.
I think so too. Like a lot of mobility, a lot of kind of cool. We always think of like, we're always bound by what we imagine things being. So like things walking on 2 legs, the things that walk on 4 legs, and when they get creative and kind of try to find ways to kind of take it outside the expectation, and Amy has that with some of the ways the robot moves around and how the limb manipulation and things like that makes it stand out, makes it really cool. So
one of the most relatable scenes, Andrew, there's this great bit where like they've got to make it through the first night, and they do so by igniting the rest of the rocket fuel that they have. And he says, "Here comes $1 billion campfire." They set on fire. The next morning, they got to head out. They're making the trek to, I think, the Mars rover to try to send out communication. But before they do, our 3 astronauts walk out to the Mars desert and urinate. And we got the shot from behind of the 3 of them all peeing and like really far. And they go, "Whoa, getting some high arc in this low gravity." My note says every man would do this. Every single man, if they are urinating on Mars, like how far can I get this? How high can I shoot this? It's something that like every dude watching can relate to. I've never been to Mars, Andrew. That is exactly what I would do if I had that opportunity, though.
100%. 100%.
Sorry, women, you just can't relate. Um, I do have a note that says Lucille is sassy. We're talking about how Carrie-Anne Moss doesn't have people to act off of, but she does have this ship that does talk and is like, like we've seen a lot of sci-fi movies, that slightly robotic voice that's like artificial gravity failing, critical failure, and it kind of has. It'll be like, yeah, that was a great idea. It's a little sassy. It's got like a little bit of personality to it that she plays off with, which I do really like that when they give it a little bit of personality, as it were. Like Moon does a good job of this. The Sam Rockwell movie, the AI there does. But sometimes you get this AI that's it's more robotic and no character to it. But you're in a sci-fi movie. Turn it up a little bit. Have a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Hal.
Man, Moon was
I
really
got to
good.
mention Hal as another example of a
Yes, obviously.
personality. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, Moon is pretty good. Moon is pretty good. Hot take, Andrew.
Yeah, sure. Only slightly held back by the problematic AI voice. But there's a movie coming out that's supposedly the whole. I read the synopsis of it and I was like, this is just Moon. Like, this is like, it's literally about like a similar idea where like, instead
Well, don't
of,
say it for people that haven't seen
yeah.
Moon. I mean,
I don't want to spoil
synopsis
Moon
is
for
kind
you
of a
guys,
spoiler.
so.
Just go see it.
It's true. Just go see it. It's good. But yeah, great movie. Duncan Jones did that. Yeah. It was his last
Andrew,
good movie.
I got a question for you about Red Planet.
Sure.
Color of Fear. Normally, I mean, the point of our show is to talk about the positive stuff that works. I think we've done that with this movie. There's a lot of stuff that I personally like, little cool ideas. My question is, our point isn't really to rate these movies or even review them, but I'm curious, if you had to give this movie a simple thumbs up or thumbs down, what would you give it?
I'll go thumbs up, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I would.
Like, thumbs up for me.
It's odd, and I spoiler, I've watched the movie for next week too. I feel kind of similarly there, where it's just kind of like, because like it's an interesting thing to think about that there was a period of time in like the late 90s, early 2000s where like Mars was in and like making prestige dramas with A-list casts about Mars was a big deal. And there's something I want to look up now as far as why that might have been the case. So
Well, that rover's from 97.
So I was thinking maybe that was it. Like in the late 90s, we actually started getting like images of Mars and like we had stuff on Mars. And so this interest in Mars kind of took off with this idea that like, oh man, like, Mars Attacks does come out before this, but that's kind of more your prototypical kind of 50s alien invasion type movie. Whereas with Red Planet and Mission to Mars are both about movies going to Mars and exploring Mars and understanding Mars. And so I think that was definitely it. Is that we had we landed the Pathfinder on Mars and it landed on July 4th, 1997. And then we lost communication with it in September. Man, it's so wild to look at some of these. I'm just looking at the Mars rovers that we've had. And like we lost comms with the Pathfinder. Then we sent the Mars Exploration Rover. And it covered 4.8 miles of distance, but then it got stuck in the sand. And that was the end. Because when you're stuck in the sand on Mars, there's no one to dig you out.
No truck is going to show up.
Nope. And we lost comms with that guy in March 2010. And just imagine if you actually lived on Mars. And like these things keep dropping from the sky and they move like the shortest amounts of distance and then they just sit there for years. Can't imagine just being like, heck is that? Oh, you're just going to sit there? All right, fine. yeah, it's wild looking at some of these things, but I think that's definitely part of it. Had to be that Pathfinder landing there in '97 and actually getting, we're on Mars at that point, and I think that definitely played a part in maybe some of this mania about kind of going to Mars now. And so, but yeah, it's wild. It's wild to think about how you think about trends in movies, that Mars was a trend at one point.
You know what else is great about this movie? It comes out in 2000, and even though it's a prestige drama set in the future about going to Mars, there's still new metal in the soundtrack. You just
Absolutely,
can't get away
man.
from it. It's still up
It's
to
like,
early
and it's
2000s.
like even crazier because like, as Peter Gabriel is on this soundtrack,
Yeah, I
the
saw
Tower
that.
That Ate People.
I think Sting does some
Sting
stuff.
is there's like a dance remix of When the World Is Running Down with different gear. Like there's all sorts of weird stuff on this, and then the soundtrack is by Graham Revel. So I mean, he's no slouch, done a bunch of stuff. But Strange Cargo's here too. So like a very like, if there's anything about this movie that's dated, it's the soundtrack.
Andrew, you'd mentioned that you've already watched the movie that we will be talking about next week. And that movie is called Mission to Mars. Another movie about going to Mars, but the ship breaks on the way there. And we got to unlock the mystery of Mars that released in the year 2000. There's undoubtedly a lot of similarities between the two movies, as people were quick to point out back in the year 2000. But as someone who's seen that movie before, there's a lot of differences too between Red Planet and Mission to Mars.
Yeah, absolutely.
We will be breaking that down next week, all the positives and best parts of Mission to Mars. But for now, it's time for our question of the week. And if you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can by hopping into our Discord. If you aren't there already, it's real easy. Just go to the show notes of this episode, wherever your podcast catcher is, whatever you use, to click on the notes. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. There's links to fun stuff, including, as I said, our Discord. Get in there. And you can leave a question like Steven did in our question of the week channel. Steven asks, I ate so many Mars bars in grade 3 that I never liked them again. Have you ever overindulged in something to the point of hating it after that? This is such a great question. My gut says yes. I don't have a specific right now.
Finally, somebody asking us the deep diving, serious questions. And
this is
I'm
what
just
ever
overjoyed.
since we started opening it up to question of the week, this is the type of hard hitting drama I've been looking for. I love that it relates to our month here, with it being Mars bars that Steven overindulged on and hasn't liked them ever since. Not quite the same thing, but I think people can also relate to if you get sick after eating something, you might not be able to eat it again. For me, that's Papa John's pizza, which I honestly never liked that much anyway. But one day after eating a lot of Papa John's, I pretty sure got food poisoning, and I don't even know if it was from the pizza or not, but I cannot even smell Papa John's to this day, much less eat it. It's a no-go for me ever since then. What about you, Andrew? What have you eaten a lot of to the point that you're sick of it now?
Oatmeal cream pies. Those Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies that you used to get. That was like the soft oatmeal cookies on the outside with the cream on the inside. I devoured those things as a child. And when I first got to college, I was like, oh man, I can eat these all the time now. And so I would buy them and I'd eat them. And eventually within like a couple of months, I was just like, oh God, these are terrible. And that happened a lot when I was in college. I had like the candy that I like loved. So I'd like, anytime I went grocery shopping, I'd be like, grab a bag of Starbursts, like, just do it because nobody's stopping me now. And I would just eat them. And I kind of got to the point where I was just kind of like, I started having the teeth problems too. Can't imagine why. But a lot of that, I was just kind of like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. This is not fun. It's too sweet. Like it's all the sugar. just got to be too much. And though I wouldn't say I hate them now. Like if somebody offers me one now, like I can eat it and be like, yeah, this is fine. But like I never seek them out anymore, ever. Like there's candy that I've eaten consistently my whole life, and I still do, like Reese's. Love me some Reese's. Never had a problem with that. Cheez-Its. I'm a Cheez-Its guy. I love me some Cheez-Its. Like I can eat those things all the time, no issue. But there's those two things in particular come to mind about things that I like overindulged on, and now I don't really seek them out in any capacity.
I think I'm a Cheez-Its guy is going to be our next shirt in the merch store.
Absolutely. There it is.
I love that I'm an adult now. I can do whatever I want. Vice what involved oatmeal. For me, it was I not necessarily in college, but my first actual apartment with my roommate. There was a shelf in my fridge dedicated to soda.
Oh,
different types of soda.
Yeah.
Just whatever was.
Oh, that's actually a great example of a thing that I drank so much I stopped drinking it now. You ever heard my Dr. Pepper story, Chris?
You've never mentioned this to me before. No, what's the Dr. Pepper
never
story?
have. So first off, 100% agreed with like once I had a fridge, like I would just go buy the cases of soda and like,
yeah. And the reasoning was like growing up, parents would always limit my soda intake. Oh, you can have one with lunch or whatever. And like it was, maybe on a road trip they'd buy me one or whatever. But I remember distinctly thinking like, I'm an adult with a job. I'm in charge of I can buy all the soda I want. I can drink 5 sodas a day. I can have a soda with every meal. No one can stop me. I make my own decisions now. Like those were my exact thoughts and reasoning behind literally always having a shelf in my fridge dedicated to various types of soda. I was never a huge Dr. Pepper guy despite growing up in Texas, but yeah, you love Dr. Pepper. So what's your Dr. Pepper story here, Andrew?
It's actually, it kind of is concurrent with Mountain Dew and Dr. Pepper, because Mountain Dew is actually one that I genuinely drank to the point that I couldn't do it anymore.
Okay, that's a good one. I do not like the taste of Mountain Dew anymore, but I used to love Mountain Dew, and I probably drank too much of it.
Like when I was in high school, like Mountain Dew was the thing. Like I would just go get Mountain Dews, Surge, Mellow Yellow, whatever lemon lime caffeine loaded soda there was, I would drink it. I do miss Surge though. But that definitely happened. And so now when there's weird flavors of Mountain Dew, I'm always hesitant because I know I don't like the flavor of Mountain Dew really, but also I drink those and I'm like, oh, this tastes nothing like Mountain Dew. One of my employees is actually like a Mountain Dew aficionado. And so I'm always like, how much does that taste like Mountain Dew? And he's like, none, try it. He's like, it's just an orange soda basically. But Dr. Pepper, I've mentioned, I've never told you this story before. It's a whole mystery. It was actually a bit of the opposite, as I drank Dr. Pepper all the time and then stopped drinking it for about however long Lent is, because my girlfriend at the time was like, we need to give something up for Lent. And I was like, do we? And she was like, yes. And I was like, all right, I'll give up soda. Because giving up just Dr. Pepper wasn't good enough. So I stopped drinking it for 40 days. I think that's how long Lent is. And I went back to drink it. It was awful. It was like drinking pure syrup. It was just absolute, like it was unpalatable to me. And it still is. Like if it's there and like, especially if it's like the fountain version with ice or something, it's usually okay. But like if somebody gives me a can of Dr. Pepper, I'm like, this is so sweet. Not in like a good way. Like I'm just like, this is like, I feel like I'm just drinking syrup. And it's just miserable. So I don't know I think I overindulged to the point that once my system had a chance to reset, it was like, no, hard no, buddy. We're cutting you off. So that's why I drink Mr. Pibb now.
It's so fun. I can't do Dr. Pepper. Ugh, the taste is gross. I'm drinking Mr. Pibb though. Like in my mind, actually, it's the same soda, but
it's not. It's because what it is, and this probably won't make any sense to anybody. It's a similar thing sort of happened with Coca-Cola afterwards. I can still drink Coca-Cola, but it can taste very bitter for me. Coca-Cola can. And but it was the same idea. After Dr. Pepper stopped working, I went to Coca-Cola because I'm not a quitter. And I did the same thing where I gave it up and then went back to it. And I was like, this is so like bitter. Like it's just like I would drink it with something, it'd be okay. But if I was just drinking a Coke, even if it was like hot outside and it was cold, I was still just like, this is so bitter. And so then I kind of drank Mr. Pibb on a whim. I think it was at Chipotle or something. I was like, oh, Mr. Pibb, haven't had that in years. And I drank it and I was like, oh, it's like I've actually got the sweet flavor. It's not overpowering. It doesn't taste too bitter. It was like the right check boxes of everything, where like it was the cherry-ish flavor of Dr. Pepper. It obviously was still carbonated in a soda, but it wasn't bitter like Coca-Cola. It's like it hit all the right spots. And it's still, to this day, one of the only sodas that I can routinely drink and not be like, this is too sweet or too bitter. It's just right, Chris.
And just so everybody knows, anytime me and the friends see Andrew drinking a Mr. Pibb, we ask him why he's drinking Mr. Pibb and not Dr. Pepper. So I've heard that story a number of times, but I will still ask you next time as if I never heard it, because that's the bit.
The problem is that I can't find Pibb Zero anywhere. Like, I'm trying to be better, trying to drink less sugar, but
just stop
in
drinking
Texas,
sodas again. You did it before.
Chris, if it were that simple, I'd have done it.
I used to drink a ton of sodas, but I can't have more than like one a day. Like, they really mess me up. It's crazy to think about how many sodas I used to be able to drink.
I remember doing like weekend hangouts with my friends, and like my one friend would bring like a case, and it would be gone by the end of the weekend. And you're just like, God, were we drinking that much? And the answer is no, it was more. Like, it was just terrible. Like, it's really awful to think about just how much. And like, I really do, like, I used to be like I tried to drink like the 0-calorie sodas. And so like, I always have like Coke Zero in my fridge. So like, if I've drank like a sugar soda already, it's like, okay, just drink. If you need the fizzy, you need the whatever, just drink the 0-calorie one. And I used to always make fun of people that, like, you know, would go to fast food restaurants and get the diet drink. And now I get it, because the food isn't, you know, if you're trying to cut out sugars, the food doesn't always have lots of sugars, but the soda always does. And so,
yeah, that's when I'm drinking a soda. It's because I'm eating, wings or a burger or something, and I need that sugar to go with the salt. It's not healthy, but it is delicious. Have you tried sparkling water? That worked for me when I needed to.
I tried it at one point and it didn't really work, but I didn't really give it. I didn't really try, so I do need to try out sparkling waters again.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste. You go through a few cans, then you're like, all right, I get it. Problem for me is I can't and don't burp. So carbonated drinks make me bloated, and there's nothing I can do about it. So switching from a soda to sparkling water doesn't solve that problem. So I can still only drink like one, and then like I'm bloated and tapped out. I don't know why this is, but there's a fun fact about me. I can't burp. But I know what you're saying about taking a break from something and then trying to go back to it and it tastes horrible. Oddly enough, when I was in college, which I didn't finish, as you'll understand by the end of the story, I didn't exactly eat healthy, but ate at home a lot. I did work in a grocery store, and we had a lot of good food there. I didn't eat fast food. There wasn't like fast food handily around. Like, there was a few on campus, but I didn't go to those. So I inadvertently went like a year without eating fast food, without really even trying to. And I distinctly remember going back home and having McDonald's for the first time in at least a year, getting chicken nuggets, which was always my jam, and biting into it and just tasting pure grease. Just no meat, just a weird texture and grease. I'm like, this is awful. Like, did the chicken nuggets change or me? And the answer was me. They were probably always this gross, but like, you go so long without eating it, and I was like, this is disgusting. Now I haven't had fast food since 2010, and I could only imagine what a chicken nugget would taste like to me right now. It'd probably be pretty gross. Again, I don't eat super healthy or anything. It's just this one particular thing that I've cut out. But still, I think it would be, not at all like it tasted in my childhood.
Was it Sam Houston, you said? The campus?
U of H.
U of H. Okay, yeah. I remember, like, Sam Houston was very similar. Like, there was some fast food on campus, but like, if you wanted to go to fast food, if you lived off campus, it was so easy. But man, the fast food on campus, and this is from a guy who eats a lot of fast food, was disgusting. Like, it was like, there was a Chick-fil-A, there was a Burger King, and I think a Pizza Hut. And man, they were not good. they were very, very bad. I just remember like getting the Chick-fil-A, especially one day, and like it was like it was all char, like it was all gristle. Like there was no actual like meat chicken in the sandwich, and I was just like, this is disgusting.
No
so I
meat
stopped
chicken.
eating there.
Where's my meat chicken?
Where's the meat chicken? There's supposed to be meat in this chicken. Campus food was terrible. But yeah, I'm trying to be better about like the processed food. So I'm trying to do less fast food. Like if I'm gonna go out for lunch, get like a sandwich, go to like Jimmy John's or Chipotle or something. Try to get something that maybe not be the healthiest thing in the world, but it wasn't made in a fryer, it wasn't processed, or I mean processed in the sense that like fast food is. Everything's processed. Unless you're eating a whole chicken with feathers on and everything, it's been processed. So I'm trying to be better, and with that's trying to drink less sugar sodas. Like I still have them. Trying to do, like you said, maybe one a day, if that. So I'm trying to be better, but unfortunately, I've not had the visceral reaction to fast food that you have. That would definitely help, but unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet.
I love this question. It's the exact level of dumb that smart and interesting that we're looking for. So please leave us more questions. Anything goes. And I would love to hear what you all have had to either give up or ate so much of that you lost the acquired taste for it and can't eat it again. That's such a fun idea. So hit us up. Let us know. Hop in that Discord or anywhere else you can find us online. And just remember, until next time, until next week, until Mission to Mars, that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. In the year 2057, Earth is rapidly becoming inhabitable for humans. In an attempt
uninhabitable.
Uninhabitable, you're right. What does habitable mean? Inhabitable. Habitable is not a word. Okay. Uninhabitable.
Yes. Jesus Christ.
I thought in was doing the work of un. Am I right?
No.
Try it again.